the efficacy of human evaluators is somewhere between sort of like 50% of the time they're getting it right, so flip of a coin, to like 70% of the time they're getting it right if they have context of the human. So if they have like, here's this
Only if
student,
they know who the human is, right?
only if they know who the human is, this human has now used AI. And you've seen 10 of their other papers, which one is AI, which one is actually their work. And that's 70% of the time they're accurate.
Welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology.
This is Darren Pulsford, Chief Solution Architect, author, and most importantly, your host. On this episode, navigating the AI landscape, trust and transparency, with CEO and founder of Originality AI, John Gillam. John, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. Thanks for having me.
Hey, when we first talked, I said, we absolutely have to have John on the show. This will be a lot of fun to talk about deepfake and all the new technologies that are out there that are causing a lot of concern for a lot of people in a lot of different industries. What's real and what's not anymore. But before we dive into that, John, every person I have on my show is a superhero. I wouldn't have anything less. And every superhero has an origin or background story. What's your origin story, John?
Interesting question. So grew up in a small town in north of Toronto. Always wanted to get back. It's a great place for. It's recently voted happiest place in Canada.
Except during February.
That's great there. We can ski. And so I've always wanted to get back to sort of focus on some sort of awesome activities that exist here. And that was sort of the genesis, or maybe the start of the superhero arc for the entrepreneurial journey. And so that's sort of what then pulled me down the entrepreneurial path, was to be able to kind of come back here and enjoy the activities that exist here.
All right. So you said entrepreneurial. So what are we talking about? What have you done in your career? How many companies have you started? How many exits have you had? How many failures?
Yeah.
The failures are more interesting to me.
Yeah, I've probably stopped counting the number of failed projects, but plenty. Had a couple exits. Currently have too many businesses right now. I have 12 entities that we need to sort of wrap up year ends on every year. Some of them I wish didn't exist. Some of them are great. But so entrepreneurial journey was mostly around sort of the world of digital marketing, publishing content on the web to get traffic from Google. And then that sort of spawned in some different directions, some software direction, sort of most recently.
All right, John. So you're going to help me by the end of the show. You're going to help me do better on my digital content. I know it's going to happen throughout the show. You're gonna give me some nice good tips. But before we help Darren and embracing digital transformation be better, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is generative AI. Unleashed on us, it'll be 3 years in October, right? Yeah. 3 years in October. November 30th, 2022. I remember the day, right?
Yep.
When ChatGPT went, hey, everyone should be trying this out. And wham, it hit like a rocket. But it's caused a lot of issues, especially for higher education and just education in general. As students picked up on this, all of a sudden, these students were writing A papers all the time, college level A papers in high school and in middle school. And this is a nightmare for learning and for a lot of different things, right?
It's been so I remember the day well. So we launched our tool actually. It was the Friday, so it was basically the 27th of November 2022, and then ChatGPT launched on the 30th. And so been a ride sort of since then around sort of deepfake detection. Some of our earliest conversations were with educators and just trying to sort of grapple with this world of what do we do? We have sort of plagiarism detection to exist to try and fight plagiarism, which was sort of like the sort of the analogy that most people were using, but this is a different beast. Generative AI is a different beast than plagiarism, and requires a different approach. And I think um, uh, a lot of fear in sort of the voices of some of the educators that I initially talked to around um, sort of how do we defend assigned writing as an educational instrument. And I don't think that has been answered. I think it's still a challenge.
Well, and I agree with you. So I actually teach at Vanderbilt University computer science. And could you imagine? I mean, ChatGPT or Junie. There's a whole bunch of really, really great Gemini code generation. I even passed in my own assignments to ChatGPT, and it wrote beautiful code, sometimes wrong. So the whole concept of writing assignments, maybe our whole concept is wrong now. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
an interesting problem.
it is an interesting problem, and I think the sort of the one of the questions that I have is that if you're going to school and you're taking education, and I don't think this is totally true, but I think it's an interesting kind of question to ask. But it's like, if you're going to school for something to improve at something that AI can do better than you'll ever be capable of doing, are you trying to learn the right skill? And I think there's uh, it's an interesting question. I don't know what that I don't like. I think if I don't think it's as obvious as that question would make it seem, but I do think there is something to be said that if what we're judging people on is no longer a valuable skill because anyone can do it if they have access to ChatGPT, then I think, yeah, our educational rethink is certainly in the cards.
But we can't just relent to Gen AI on everything. we're
Agreed.
we're going to end up like all those guys on Wall-E, the animated Pixar movie, right? Where we're all just sitting around, fat, dumb, and happy, can't do anything for ourselves anymore. Maybe,
Yeah.
hey, maybe that's a good life. I don't think so, but
I don't think so either, but I do think there's probably a significant percent of the world that would pick that option.
yeah, I think so. With generative AI out there, right? Writing content and doing all that. Um, I guess the first question is, do we care if it's Gen AI?
So I think it depends on the situation. I think society is going to grapple with this question. I've got young kids. Do I care if I read a review about baby formula that was my kids are past baby, but if that was written by AI, that was a personal experience about some sort of like
Hmm.
baby toy that was written by AI. I think that's a pretty clear no. If I get like, hey,
But
here's a long,
do you trust the shills that are out there writing reviews on Amazon products?
um, I trust that the right now that ecosystem is relatively imbalanced. That yes, there's some shills, but that would be hard to totally overweigh the that if the product was absolutely terrible. And
Gotcha.
so
Yeah.
I think the current ecosystem is generally imbalanced. I think when you inject fake at a volume that drowns out the real, then that ecosystem falls out of balance, and that's a problem. And so I'd
Gotcha.
say
So
that's why we
it's the volume in addition to, right? That's a
yeah.
problem.
Yeah, and so
But
that's
all
the
right.
sort of like reviews. But then there's like academia. You don't want people care if it's AI or not. Google certainly cares, and that's where sort of a lot of at least our users are focused on is making sure that content that they pay to write or $100, $1,000 for isn't copied and pasted to ChatGPT in 7 seconds.
Yeah, that's an interesting dilemma because, as you said before, if anyone can do the writing, then what value is it? But let's say that I have a startup, which I've got a production company that does this podcast. I use generative AI a lot for like summarizing this conversation. It's a 30-minute
Yep.
conversation. Before I had a writer that would listen to the episode and write up a summary. that cost me about $100 an episode,
Yep.
right? Now it's like a penny an episode.
Yeah. So I think in that situation, it's a great use case. You know, the human component, the net new information. I mean, the
Oh, I see where
challenge.
you're going. Right. Yeah. It's net. We are creating content right now
Mhm,
that a Gen AI is not creating, but a Gen
correct.
AI can now summarize this. It can help with. I see where you're going. This is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you were to just go to a generative AI and say, create a podcast between John and Darren, here's their bios, go. Then AI needs to look at its, what does it do? What does Gen AI do? It looks at its sort of training data, bunch of sources, and then it creates a derivative piece of work on what has already existed into the world. And we've gone on tangents that are far more sort of human than the Gen AI that would have made the John and Darren um, podcast, then it would have gone. So I think certainly Google, along with others, have sort of this strong care for like net new information injected into the world. If all you're doing is producing a derivative piece of work, then that is not adding anything new, valuable to the world. And I think often that's what generative AI does, because it just takes what it knows in its
Right.
brain and shuffles it around.
Got it. So this is really interesting. So you're saying that Google is now filtering out generative AI content that's been and is it only doing it on text, or is it doing it on video as well, or on audio? Do you know?
So we deeply studied text. The short answer to that is yes, they are. The nuanced answer is that they're focusing on the worst offenders. So AI, they really interesting challenge where they need to be this AI forward company while also defending their search rankings from being overrun by AI. And so it's sort of this really tricky
Yeah,
challenge
that's
for
an
them.
interesting dilemma.
Yeah, and so they are waging aggressive war on AI spam. So any mass-produced AI content, text is what we look at most. They are waging a war, manually de-indexing sites, causing a lot of pain to sites that didn't know that their writers were going off and producing content with AI.
Interesting. So you brought up an interesting point. If I'm paying a writer, I don't want Gen AI to write the content for me because I'm paying the writer. I could just do the Gen AI myself.
Correct. Or you could. I think that the challenge is when there's not transparency between the sort of all the actors in that flow. So if you were to say, hey writer, you can use AI, what's a fair rate for you to be allowed to use AI, and then review it. So it's like whatever your policy is that's where it becomes important that there's sort of transparency between the writer, the editor, and ultimately the buyer, the risk owner of that content. So if publishing AI generated content is risky, then whoever owns that risk wants to be the one that makes the decision on whether or not
Got-
that content gets
Gotcha.
published.
Gotcha. No, that's really interesting. So let's dive into the technology a little bit because I've been using Grammarly, for example.
Yep.
I've been using Grammarly for 7 years since it's instant, since I even heard about it, which is about 7 years ago. I'm a horrible writer.
Yep.
I'm not great with my grammar and things like that. But I got all these crazy ideas in my head that Grammarly has helped me get out on because I could write a paragraph that's poorly formed, the whole thing, and then it can clean up my grammar. I can then go and arrange it. Um, and I wrote a whole dissertation, 220 page dissertation. Thank you, Grammarly. Right? I mean, that it saved my keister. I never would have gotten through my PhD program without it. Is that cheating?
So I think so no, I don't think so. I think there's a long we've done a study around what level of looking at
And
character replacement
yeah,
threshold on what's the rate that is it, like, is it 1% can be changed out and it's still yours? Like obviously yes. What if it's 90%? Probably
mm,
not.
right,
And
probably
so
not.
where is that line? It was interesting to see some of the results where a lot of academia was sort of drawing the line around 5%, where saying that up to 5% characters have changed, then that's cool. That's still the same. That's the student's work. um, different. It was also really um, when somebody says light AI editing, that can range from sort of like a 1% to 50%. The sort
Yeah,
of
I
like
was gonna say, yeah.
societal's alignment around what light AI editing means is definitely not fixed. And so it's and I'm in a similar situation. I'd rather think in spreadsheet form than written word form.
Right.
And we need to write in this world. And so AI, Grammarly, and now sort of like a custom trained ChatGPT for me. I'm like, oh wow, that's what words are supposed. That's so much
Yeah,
better.
yeah,
Thank you.
exactly. Or hey, give me
Yeah.
a synonym for this. I mean,
Right.
ultimately, though, us as humans should be reading and reviewing things before they go out and making changes and right, because Gen AI makes stuff up. I mean, a lot. That's what it
Yeah.
means to generate, right? It's generative. It's generating new content. It's not just rearranging words. It's adding words to it and removing some words. So it's creating new content. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, this whole area is really fascinating to me because moving forward, I see so much benefit in generative AI for people that aren't good at writing or
Yeah.
expressing themselves. We've got voice to text, which frankly, towards the end of my dissertation, I was just talking to my computer um, and getting my ideas out because I couldn't type fast enough.
Yeah.
And so that's a form of AI, but it's still my words.
Still your words. I think that would like most technology that is built to identify AI generated text will generally not identify
Well, of course. Yeah.
voice to text. Yeah.
Yeah. So fascinating. This is a fascinating work. So let's take a look at some common patterns that you can identify very quick. I'm sure you're an expert in this area. I'm sure you can read anything and say generated, generated, generated. You can do that, right?
So it's interesting. You think you can. So you think you can. Humans have a very strong bias towards both overconfidence and pattern recognition. If you ask a room of drivers, how many of you are an above average driver? 80% of the room puts their hand up. And the entire gambling industry is built on the sort of
Yeah, I'm
belief
gonna
that
win.
humans can identify patterns in noise. And so we have these biases that sort of lead us to think that we're really capable of identifying patterns. Certainly, there's some text that's out there that you're like, yeah, like tons of emojis, delve into M dashes. Like, there's some things that like, yeah, that's AI. But when there's been studies that have been done looking at human evaluators and their capabilities at identifying AI generated content. This has been done heavily within academia because that's sort of like what are the mechanisms to try and defend the written word as an educational tool. The efficacy of human evaluators is somewhere between sort of like 50% of the time they're getting it right, so flip of a coin, to like 70% of the time they're getting it right if they have context of the human. So if they have like, here's this
Only
student,
if they know who the human is, right?
only if they know who the human is. This human has now used AI. And you've seen 10 of their other papers. Which one is AI? Which one is actually their work? And that's 70% of the time they're accurate. So it's a pretty dismal performance for humans. Yet we
Yeah,
all
that's
think
a
we can
C. That's a
because
C. A C plus, maybe.
yeah, yeah. But we are, and in those studies, the how much did you think you got right? 90%. What did you actually get right? 60%. Yeah, and I think I'm in the same. I mean, we all have the same biases. That's what that makes them so blind to us. But yeah, it's kind of a fascinating. I think
So
if you ask anyone, they think they can see CAA content.
So that's very disconcerting if I'm worrying about whether something's Gen AI generated. Uh, not only that, but the truth behind it, right? Because we know humans can write false things too, right? I
Yep.
mean, That's how the Revolutionary War in the United States started, by the way. Yellow journalism, right? The Boston Massacre, 5 people died. It wasn't a massacre, but you know what I mean. So,
Yeah,
so not only identifying what's Gen AI generated, but also truth around that. That's a whole nother philosophical
right.
thing. But this is disconcerting that humans, we're not
Yeah,
going to be able to just look at something that Gen AI generated. That, I mean, that's
yeah. I think there's real like there's I don't know of any sort of significant innovation that has not had consequences. Smartphone not been good for mental health. But social media, recent history, car probably not great for the planet. Not that horses would have been all that good either, but
we walk around and road apples is what we call them growing up all the time.
yeah. So I think there's not been an innovation that has not had
Some impact.
externalities, some negative impact, and certainly AI will have negative aspects. And I think the this sort of when I went through school, internet became sort of a thing, and it was
Right.
like, don't trust anything on, like, it was drilled into you. Don't use Wikipedia for sourcing. It's wrong. And now, well, it's actually the most right. Um,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and
Isn't
so
that fascinating how that
yeah,
happened?
yeah. And so I think, we've gone from this sort of world of like, don't trust anything on the internet to like, maybe you can, but like but it's nuanced, right? And it's sort of probably a similar progression where it's going to go from like this sort of like binary approach to generative AI content of like, love it, live with it, want it, to like resisting it, where it'll turn into this more nuanced approach. The same way that like what we read on the internet, most people know that they should
Double
not
check.
believe everything they read on the internet. And I think now it's like we'll get to the same place where it's like, don't believe everything you see from generative AI. Fine, if it really matters to you, if it's sort of a significant thing to your life, you better go find some extra sources to just be really sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because checking sources should be in part of our critical thinking that we're doing on these things. But I've noticed something interesting. I do workshops for higher education on generative AI and keynotes and things like that. And in a recent workshop, I asked them, "How do you know that this stuff is true?" And they said, "Well, I asked Gen AI to give me references, and it gives me a set of references." I said, "Did you check the references?" They go, "Well, no, because the references, I mean, come on, they're from like Harvard Business Review and things like that." And I said, "Check the references." And they did, and they said, "Oh my goodness, it made it up. It made up a reference."
Yeah.
And I explained to him, I said, "Look, generative AI has been programmed to give you an answer. It is greedily wanting to please you.
Mhm.
It will do anything it can to give you an answer, even make stuff up. So if you ask for references and it doesn't have any, it's like a 5-year-old, getting caught in a lie. They will continue with the lie, right?
It-
And
yeah.
so it does that. That's the way it's been programmed. And I saw light turn on in a lot of the faculty members. They were like, "Oh, wow, I really have to check. I have to actually do my homework. I can't rely on it completely."
Yeah, and it's also this sort of reverse confirmation bias where it's like it's saying the thing, and then it's saying the data that it used, the sources that it used to produce that answer. What sort of you really want, if it really matters to you, is like, now show me sources that disagree with this opinion, so that you can understand, because you're like, it's like intelligently, if that's the right word to use, but like certainly convincingly being intelligent, that it is
Yeah, it's
showing you a position, and then it's saying, and these are the sources that prove my position, which is better than just totally making it up. But even if those sources exist, even if they haven't hallucinated those sources, it's still a confirmation bias where they're cherry picking the sources to support their position.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's what we do in a PhD dissertation.
Yep.
We have our position. We find all the other works that support our position, and then we do surveys or we do testing to validate our position.
Yep.
That's right. I mean, it was trained to do what we've been trained to do in the
Right.
research world, and finding contrary to that is part of that as well. So, tell me a little bit about what your technology brings to the table. So if humans can only detect this stuff between 50 and 70% of the time, but we're confident at 90% that, yeah, we're right.
Yep.
Give me a tool, buddy. Give me, I mean, how do I know? Right.
Yeah. So there's no tool that is perfect. So that's the sort of interesting part to this world now is that so our tool. So my background as in the world of content marketing, we had a content marketing agency. We wanted to be able to sort of drive transparency between the writer, the editor, the agency, and ultimately the customer on was AI used or not in the creation of this content. And so we actually built an AI detection tool, ended up launching it the weekend before ChatGPT launched, which was kind of crazy
Yeah,
timing.
that's awesome, man.
Yeah. Yeah, but and so what it does, it's so we think of it as kind of like the good Terminator, where it's our own AI that is capable of identifying if if content was generated by AI or a human. Its efficacy is sort of 99% of the time it will call AI, and then sort of 1 to 3% of the time it will call human AI. Lower on different types of text, but sort of the result is that AI detection tools are highly accurate, but not perfect, and then that creates some additional interesting challenges in the world on what use cases is that level of efficacy acceptable.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because there was a case, a Purdue English professor at Purdue asked ChatGPT to analyze. Do you remember this
Yeah,
case?
yeah, yeah. And he failed, and then ChatGPT, like we talked about, wants to please, and so hallucinated the answer that every student's paper was AI generated, and he failed them,
And
and
he failed
that
them
was not the
all.
case. Yeah,
Yeah, but it was not the case.
yeah,
So, boy, which AI do we trust? Do we trust John's AI or do we trust? It's an
yeah.
interesting dilemma. So, you feel well. You already mentioned Google's starting to use these tools like yours. Hopefully, yours. That'd be an awesome contract to land.
That'd
So,
be a
hey,
good one.
you Google guys out there, you need to buy John's stuff. How's that? There's your pitch right there,
Yeah,
John.
perfect. Yeah,
So,
no,
I mean, there are reasons to do that. We
yes,
also know that training AI on AI generated content leads to a disaster in the long run.
yep.
So these tools are going to become important, and if they aren't already, it sounds like they already are. Um,
Yeah, no, we certainly didn't set out to build a societally important business, but it is being used for critical applications where that level of efficacy is acceptable. So user generated content platforms where you don't want the platform to be overrun by bots, but it's okay if you sort of kick out 1% of of real of
a,
real
a
human
real
answers
right.
gets rejected. That's an acceptable, not ideal, but an acceptable trade-off to preserving the integrity of the platform. Online review platforms, it's an existential threat to them if all of their reviews just get overrun by AI bots. And so being able to filter out AI from human in those platforms is definitely an existential threat. And an error rate of 1% is
Yeah,
very
that's
acceptable.
acceptable. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So that
yeah.
yeah, no, it's definitely it's a yeah fascinating problem to be sort of at the center of to be trying to sort of give tooling to navigate how society wrestles with um, what is acceptable. You know, there's a lot of focus around the sort of ethical development of AI, and I think with the conversation will evolve into ethical use of AI as the years go on.
No, absolutely. Which brings up my next and probably most important question: what can I do in the summary of my podcast that's going to be generated from this to make it seem more human?
Um,
Because I don't want to spend all the time and money on doing that, but I want my stuff to be accessible and found. Do I just write a small paragraph at the beginning and say, hey, summarize what it's already going to summarize below? I mean, what are some of the tips or tricks that can help me put the human back into some of this content that's being generated for me?
and so I think we are injecting the human and in this conversation. And so I'd say, I think the risk for that type of content is that the user doesn't know if you have reviewed it or not. And so I think in that case, transparency with the reader about how it was generated and that it was reviewed by Darren. And
Oh,
so if it's
I
like
like that, John. That's good.
that we this is summarized, like, because no one wants to flog you and have you suffer through doing something that is clearly capable to be done by AI. I mean, maybe there's some people, but
Yeah. There are some of my competitors, right? Some of my coworkers, maybe. You never
yeah,
know.
yeah. Sometimes my wife,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's right.
um, but being able to where I get most concerned and where I think most people get concerned is like, is is the author behind this? Did they read this? Do they stand behind this, or is this just totally bot generated and no human is in the loop? And so if you can transparently communicate that this was summarized on human conversation, not deep fakes, and this was AI generated, and this was reviewed by yourself or by an editor.
Oh, you know what? I like that. I'm going to start putting that at the beginning of my YouTube summaries
Yep.
and my blog posts and things. Hey, I'll put a little small sentence or two or three sentences at the beginning and say, "Hey, I hope you enjoyed the content. This came out of the show today." I like that because that
Yep.
puts the human back into all this stuff.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, John, this has been incredible. If people want to learn more about you or your companies, all 12 of them, where do they go?
Yeah, so Originality AI is the company that we've been talking about that sort of focuses on AI detection, and helping out anybody that is a copy editor do their job better, get a piece of text and make sure it meets their requirements. That's at Originality AI, and they can reach me at John at Originality AI, or find me on LinkedIn.
John, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. This is you've given me some great ideas. I appreciate it.
No, it's fun conversation. Appreciate it, Darren.
Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and embrace the digital revolution.